carried. Thank you. And the timing of the global settlement decisions for council. Brendan, do you want to join us and run through these?
Thanks, Len. Just a very short paper to bring to the council in a public agenda the key dates that we're working towards for the global settlement. In working back, the decision date that we're proposing is the council meeting on the 8th of August, hearing deputations on the 6th of August and publicly releasing the paper as soon as it is completed, and we're expecting that to be on the 29th of July. So those are the dates that you'll be aware that we're working towards. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you. Obviously, it's a very unique piece of work to be consulted on, Brendan, and notwithstanding all the time pressures on both our side and the Crown's, is there a chance we could make that time frame longer, or are there just too many dependencies over which we have not as much control as we might usually have?
What we'll be trying to do, I think the challenge is being able to meaningfully consult, which you kind of need to know what you're consulting on, and there are still significant moving parts at the moment where today we don't have a proposal to consult on. It would be too broad. So I think the challenge is being able to provide meaningful information, and the 29th is the date that I'm working towards having meaningful information that will be a specific proposal. In the week beforehand, if we've got information at that stage that we're confident out, we'll try and bring that date forward as soon as we can. But I've tried to be realistic there, that there is still a number of moving parts that we need to land.
Yeah, I don't know that it's a consultation. It's the deputation provisions that are under our standing orders, and I think it's always well, it's not always, but sometimes it's actually unhelpful to have the meeting taken up with deputations, and then only those that turn up that are aware that they can come and make deputations on the day itself are those that are able to kind of be the final influences before council debates the yes or the no of the global settlement. So it's not so much a consultation, it's just an opportunity to use the deputation provisions ahead of the meeting where council will determine whether to accept the global settlement or not. Yeah. I think that's a reasonable summary of where we're going.
And that's correct. And obviously it's there are pros and cons. What we've tried to do with the timing of the deputations is allow councillors sufficient time to hear the deputations and obviously not on the day and then make a decision straight after hearing deputations. Yeah. So you'll get a couple of good nights sleep in between hearing the deputations and then making your decision, which we think is appropriate, but it's balancing that with providing enough time for people to read the proposal on the 29th and then make their deputation on the 6th of August.
Yeah. Dion, then Aaron.
No, I think you've kind of answered what I was going to ask, because I was just wondering whether between the 29th and the 6th, given the breadth of this, was enough time for people who are interested. I think you've kind of answered.
I'll be more than happy, and I'm sure others will as well, to work with groups or interested parties in that period to ensure that we're out and about and communicating as well as what we can. The proposal at that stage, obviously, the decision making of council is a matter that you'll decide on the 8th.
Yeah, there are a number of groups, and I think Brendan's willing to put up his hand, as well as others, to go out and actually actively engage with people prior to the deputations.
And you think you can do that within that time frame between when the paper is released on the 29th and when we'll hear the submissions on the 6th? Yep. Well, not the submissions, the deputations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Aaron.
Yeah, it's just more for a public clarification, Brendan, that because I've been asked a couple of times by members of the public around the global settlement and its timing and the Capital Acceleration Fund, and the question they ask is when will that money be in the bank for the council, and is there a chance that the waters might get muddied between the two?
I don't think there's a chance that the waters will get muddied between the two. The council, as you'll be familiar with, in September last year made the stage 1 investment proposal decisions related to the $300 million Canterbury Regeneration Acceleration Facility, the CRAFT funding. We're now in the kind of final couple of months of the detailed investment cases for that, and so each of those 3 investment cases for the 220 million earmarked for the Canterbury multi-use arena, 40 million earmarked for roading and transport improvements, and 40 million earmarked for Otaka Raven River corridor projects. Each of those investment cases will come to council in the month or 2 after making the global settlement decision.
So any possible dates of when that money's likely to be in the council's bank accounts?
I think the date that it's in our bank account will depend on the date that we would propose to start spending it, and that the money would transfer. We're not going to spend $300 million on day one, so I wouldn't have thought that we'd get $300 million on day one. We'll spend it over a period of time, and we'll just need to figure out the details of when that money will come over, based on our spend profile, which will fall out of the investment cases.
Yanni?
So given that we've just heard all this news from NZTA about a number of projects, including some of the Central City projects not being funded, and given that we have had no public consultation on the Acceleration Fund, how can we incorporate people's views if they feel quite strongly around some of the priorities we should have with central government?
Sure, so that was something that the council asked a number of questions about, and I know deliberated about greatly in September. In remember September, you had recently come out of the LTP process at that point in time, and there was a very strong feedback through the LTP process, and it was reaffirmed in the feedback that the council receives through the citizen surveys, that improving the quality of roads and footpaths was one of the key actions that the public wanted the council to do. So at a kind of meta level, I don't think that there's much disagreement that the public want to improve the state of the roads and footpaths. What we have always had is a long list of works, and an additional $40 million will allow us to go further down that list than what X minus $40 million allows you to do. So it allows you to continue down the list. It also allows you to spend some money in areas such as the second coat seals and resurfacing that are very tangible to people. So I don't think it's a matter of reconsulting on new streets or new particular footpaths. The council has a long list and a backlog from the earthquake period of footpaths and roads that it's seeking to repair, and $40 million allows it to make a dent in that piece of work.
But just in terms of the current situation, where a number of Central City accessible projects are not likely to receive central government funding through NZTA anymore, and a number of PT projects that you could argue were actually earthquake recovery, or may have been possibly included in the original cost share, they are now being losing funding from NZTA. So just in terms of the public consultation, I'm just trying to understand if there's an ability for the public to send, I guess, feedback around the infrastructure and the PT, priorities that we should negotiate with central government.
Oh, well, I think we've now just come out of another annual plan process where we receive a lot of feedback through the annual plan process on improving streets and improving footpaths and improving public transport, and I'm sure Council Laws will take that into your consideration in making the decision on the investment case. I would just point out that we're still in discussions with NZTA on the level of contribution that they will make to the transport projects. So that hasn't been settled. We are still negotiating with NZTA over that. We believe that they're important projects, and we also believe that both the TFAR and the FAR funding was appropriate given the nature of those projects.
Right, okay.
Any other questions? Jimmy?
I'm still a little bit confused, particularly on deputation heard on the 6th of August. Usually, you know, the residents or group make the deputation on the formal council meeting. That's a Thursday. But the 6th of August, there's a council workshop. So I'm not sure. We heard you mean that we organize extraordinary meeting to hear from the public or not, and also on Thursday, formal council meeting, no more deputation. Am I right? Beforehand or not?
Yeah, what we'll probably do is actually start the council meeting that would have otherwise started on Thursday on Tuesday the 6th of August. So it will be a public council meeting on the 6th of August. And at that meeting, you'll be able to hear deputations. Then after the deputations are heard, adjourn the meeting until Thursday the 8th. And then on Thursday the 8th, you'll have this paper along with other papers, and that will then be a regular council meeting. So if people wish to make deputations on this paper, they'll need to make them on the 6th of August.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll move the motion. Seconded Andrew. Any debate? Glenn, Andrew, Dion.
Thank you. Good to have this report. Thank you, Brendan. A few of us were there when the Prime Minister campaigned and said this will be for the people of Christchurch to decide. So I'm very, very mindful that today we're talking about one day, 8 days after the release of what we hope will be the full information for people to then prepare a deputation to the council. Obviously a large amount of money, 300 million, and a lot of money and a lot of interests at stake. So I just really want to underline the fact that we need to make this process as open and as potentially long as possible in terms of the lead-in time. When you think about one of those projects, the residential red zone, it's quite a short time in relation to the significance of what happened and the effect on the surrounding physical and social landscape. But I look forward to this. It's good we're having this today. By way of a heads up, people can prepare somewhat. But just to underline, it's not a normal consultation process, as the Mayor has said, it's by way of deputation. But we still need to ensure people have as much time as they can to have their say.
Andrew.
Thank you very much. I certainly welcome this paper coming today because it does exactly what it sets out to do. It gives advance notice of when the proposal is likely to be released and brought before council, and it also gives people a heads up of the method and timing of engagement if people are wanting to engage with this. And I think it's worth noting that this is a complex and difficult and wide-ranging process that we're going through, and it's certainly better to take the time to get this right than to have, for example, rushed to get a decision by the end of June when some of the discussions maybe weren't as complete as we would need them to be at that point. So whilst the decision may be a little bit later than we would have originally expected, I think it's good that we're using the opportunity today to give a heads up as to what the timing will be so that people can prepare to engage with the information once it's released and with us over the decision. We'd certainly always made clear that the expectation would be that this council would make a decision on the global settlement matter. We're still within timeframes where that can occur. I think what we've done is successfully found the balance between taking the time that we need to do to get to the best outcome we possibly can, giving a heads up that there is an opportunity for public feedback and public engagement by way of that deputation process on the 6th of August, and still arrived at a point where we can make a confident decision well within this term of council. And I'd also take the opportunity to thank people that have been involved in what I know has been a huge amount of work, not only getting us to the point that we're at and will be at by the time the papers are released, but also keeping the pressure on to make sure that we keep to the sort of timelines that are in this paper today.
Sorry, Dion and Yanni.
Yeah, I certainly welcome having this advance notice as well coming in for a decision that we need to make. One of one of the things that we were talking about right early on in this term was about local leadership, and this is where we're sort of transitioning from that Crown Council partnership more to a local leadership of the assets and the rebuilt city. And there's a lot of things in this that people should get their heads around when they see the information, so that they can actually come and bring us what their priorities are for the city moving forward. I would encourage people to find the cost share agreement and actually look at what was agreed to in those early days, and look at what we've got now, and kind of see where we can go with that and what people's priorities are when they come and make those deputations to us, because this is a big decision. There is a lot of money and a lot of assets tied up with this, and the decision that we make is going to bind the city for a long time into the future about how we move forward, especially in the residential red zone. There's a lot of stuff in the central city, those big assets, and this is really putting, hopefully when we make the decision, putting the stake in the ground, saying actually, Crown, we're working with you, but we're leading the city moving into the future. So I do welcome this. I do have given the size of this, I would have liked to have seen more time for people in the communities who have interest to be able to take the information and really drill down on that. But it's good to know that the staff are willing to go out and talk to those communities and hold those those workshops with them. So a lot of work in that week, but I'd really like to hear what the communities do say, and I really encourage all of those people interested to come and tell us.
Yanni?
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I just think the time is too limited for people. And, we've often heard from groups who want to make submissions. They get challenged and say, oh, well, do you have a mandate from your committee? Well, they need actually 4 to 5 weeks to actually do that. So it makes it really hard for groups to actually give feedback, to check with their membership and sign off on things like submissions or deputations. Fundamentally, I think we need to think of this as not just a global sentiment in terms of financial issues, but actually the point that many other people have made is there's a number of other things that government are doing, areas where they're spending money, that we as a city should try and get some agreement, whether it's things like our social housing not being eligible for income-related rents. It just seems crazy that we don't put in a number of external relationships to existing government budgets or processes as part of this, given the situation that we find ourselves in. I think
we're
for those of
debating
us,
the timetable, Yanni.
for those of us who were here when the original cost share was agreed, the report that came to council was very different to the signed agreement, and that's totally responsibility of the council for allowing it to be delegated away. So I blame no one except those who agreed not to have it come back and see it final. But the biggest issue, the two big issues were the convention centre and the infrastructure cap. Government wanted us to have an infrastructure cap. We rejected that, and ultimately, sadly, that was implemented in other ways as well, and without any transparency. So as we've gone on, we've seen a huge damage to our infrastructure, which we expected as a council that wasn't quantified at the time of the original cost share. We're now picking up the huge cost associated to that. And I think it's really important that we explain clearly to the public why the infrastructure damage is not fully funded from central government and what we're doing to address it. But I welcome the opportunity for the public to have a say. It's a shame that they haven't had a chance to have a say in the 300 million. I think people will take the opportunity through this process to comment on that, even though I know in the report it says that it's separate. I don't see how you can separate that out.
Thank you. I'll wind up the debate. Look, I agree with Yanni in terms of a couple of matters in relation to the cost-sharing agreement. That decision was made by council behind closed doors. But what was worse was that the actual cost-sharing agreement wasn't publicly released, and even then in a redacted form, till December 2013. So 6 months after it was signed, it was publicly released. And that made it very difficult for people to know what it actually said. And even then, there were elements of it that weren't crystal clear, because I remember David East and I going through the civil defence and emergency management provisions to find out that actually we'd not been promised the full recovery on our on all of our damaged infrastructure. It was only that required to restore our networks. And that's how that happened. I don't know whether disclosure at the time would have highlighted that, because nobody pointed it out. We had to go searching for the answer as to why we were in that position several months after the document was signed. I've said from the get-go that we would make this decision in public, and we are holding to that, and this report states that very clearly. And I believe that people have got the right to hear us debate the issues. I don't think that those issues should be debated behind closed doors, and I think they should be allowed to read the material upon which we are going to make a decision. And I think that to me is the whole basis for us having this report today. We have real shortcomings in our standing orders process, which allows the few and favoured to be aware that they can use the deputation process on the day of a matter appearing on a council agenda. How many people sort of generally know that out in the wider community? Not many. By actually arranging the meeting to have the deputations component heard on the 6th of August, and then for the council to consider it separately, one, it draws attention to the fact that those organisations that have expressed strong interests in the total global settlement package will have an opportunity to come and express their views. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's healthy to allow people to contribute by way of feedback, because that's what we're inviting. It is not a consultation process. It is an opportunity to provide feedback. And yeah, we get to sleep on it for 2 nights before we come back and debate the global settlement. I think people do want to see an end to this issue, and for us to draw a line in the sand and essentially, and I was going to say move on, but I hate that expression so much after everything that we've been through that I'll have to find an alternative to it. So, but anyway, we've got the resolution moved and seconded. I know I just said it. I'll move on to putting the resolution. So all those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank